Good afternoon, everybody. It's now 2 p.m. and welcome to this meeting of the Development Control and Regulatory Board. This is a public meeting and is being broadcast via YouTube. Could I remind members to turn their microphones on when speaking and to turn them off when they have finished speaking? We are not expecting a fire alarm, but if the fire alarm does go off, please exit the committee rooms via the door you came in, turn right and go through the double doors down the flight of stairs, which will lead to the two fire exits. We have received apologies from Mr. Richard Allen, County Councillor. Agenda item 1, minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of October 2024, pages 3 to 6. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of October 2024 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Everybody agreed? Thank you, members. Agenda item 2, question time. I have not received any questions from the public. Agenda item 3 is questions asked by members under Standing Order 7(3) and 7(5). I have not received any questions from members. Agenda item 4 is to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. There are no urgent items. Agenda item 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. It is noted that all members who are also members of a parish, town or district council or liaison committee will have personal interest in those applications which relate to areas covered by those authorities. Are there any other interests to declare, please, members? No, thank you very much. Agenda item 6 is the presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. I have not received any petitions. So we'll move on to the substantive items. Reports of the Director of Environment and Transport on tree preservation orders. Agenda item 7. Proposal of a new Leicestershire County Council tree preservation order, Roman Way Day Centre, Market Harborough, pages 7 to 26 in your agenda packs. This report will be presented by Jason Peach, who's online today, tree officer. Jason is joining us online and has kindly agreed to present this report on his day off. So thank you very much, Jason. Over to you, please. You're on mute, Jason.
Apologies.
Got you. Go for it.
Okay. So as you'll note, this is a presentation to do with a new tree preservation order in Roman Way, Market Harborough. So the purpose of the report is so the board can take notice of the preservation order on that would protect 2 mature lime trees to the frontage of the site of Roman Way. The background is that the site currently, Roman Way, Market Harborough, situated opposite Doddridge Road, is currently owned by Leicestershire County Council. However, the site has recently gone on the market and is currently up for sale. As part of the tree officer's duties, the properties that are due for disposal are assessed to see if there are any trees that are worthy of protecting before they leave the management of Leicestershire County Council. So to date, this year, in 2024, there were 4 sites that were visited, and it was only Roman Way that had trees that met the criteria for protection by a new tree preservation order. The 2 trees were assessed using the recognised TEMPO method, which is tree evaluation for the making of preservation orders. And out of a possible 25 points, the trees scored 18, so making them merit or worthy of making a new tree preservation order. The County Council is able to make new tree preservation orders in specific circumstances, which we'll see a little later on. As we know, TPOs or tree preservation orders are used to protect selected trees and woodlands if their removal will have a significant impact on the local environment and the enjoyment by the public. Trees can be specified either individually, referenced by an area, or groups, or in woodlands. If a tree has a merit of its own right, it would be specified as an individual tree, which is the case with these 2 trees at Roman Way, Market Harborough. They will be classified as T1 and T2 on the new order. So the new TPO would protect these two mature lime trees on Roman Way, Market Harborough. So that is just the outline flow chart that shows that the process for making new tree preservation orders, which we would follow to confirm the order finally if it was agreed. At the moment, T1 and T2, the two lime trees, don't have any other statutory protection on them. They don't fall within the Market Harborough Conservation Area. As we'll see later on one of the plans, the Council Strategic Property Services requested an external architect to draw up plans to show the site's potential as a residential site. And these plans do not include the retention of T1 and T2. If the site is sold, which we would presume that it eventually would be, the council would no longer be able to enforce protection on these two trees. So the legal considerations, the planning controls relating to the trees are set out in Part 8 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. And county planning authorities only have limited powers pursuant to this act to make new tree preservation orders. These limited authority that we have are Part A in connection to the grant of a planning permission, Part B on land that is not wholly within the area of a single district council, Part C on land in which the county council holds an interest, or Part D on land in a national park. So in the case of these two lime trees, it would be C, which is on land in which we currently hold an interest. Point 15 notes that trees in the conservation area that are not protected by TPO are protected by provisions of the Section 211 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, which of course makes it an offence to cut down or damage these trees within a conservation area. There are no discernible equality implications to do with this tree preservation order. Also in point 17, there are no discernible human rights implications arising from this tree preservation order. Point 18, there are no resource implications, but point 19 does bring our attention that there is a possible financial implications if Leicestershire County Council were to make a new TPO for T1 and T2. The architect who developed and suggested the site layout indicated that the proposed property to the north of the entrance of Roman Way, as it sits in close proximity to T1 and T2, would no longer be viable, which may affect the sale or value of the land. The site plan, which is attached as Appendix B, is an indicative layout, and the purchaser and developer would determine the final layout for the site as approved by the local planning authority. So here we have the defined layout of the site. So this is the proposed draft layout. The extent of the site is marked with the red line, and the location of the two trees is marked with the blue circle right at the entrance as you enter the property. So this is a view of T1 and T2 as you approach the site from Roman Way, approaching from the southwest. This is a view of the two trees approaching from the northwest along the Doddridge Road. And this is a planned location of T1 and T2 where they're situated along the Roman Way within Market Harborough. So the conclusions are that Leicestershire County Council has a duty of care to responsibly manage the trees under its care, and this includes protecting those trees worthy of retention and that add amenity and ecology to specific locations. The retention of high value trees on Leicestershire County Council properties is also a demonstration of the council meeting its strengthened biodiversity duties. The making of this new TPO will protect the trees from future development when the property is no longer under the management of Leicestershire County Council, so that the trees will remain in position and continue to add to the amenity and ecology of the area. So the recommendation is that Leicestershire County Council will create a new TPO for Roman Way, Market Harborough to protect T1 and T2 lime trees from being removed at a later date. Thank you, Chair. Any questions?
Thank you, Jason. Very well explained. We can see your recommendation. Any questions from members? Okay, we have a proposer, Mr. Grimley, and a seconder. We move straight to the vote then. So the officer's recommendation is to create 2 TPOs, tree preservation orders, Roman Way, Market Harborough, to protect T1 and T2 lime trees from being removed. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, members. We move on to agenda item 8. Reports in Chief Executive on planning applications, county matter. Application 2022/10125/04 and 2022/01384/07. Other suffixes. Midland Quarry Products Limited, continuation of mineral operations, overburden disposal and ancillary activities at Cliff Hill Quarry, West Lane, Colville. It is in your agenda pack as pages 27 to 134. We do have 3 speakers on this item. But first off, Amelia Mystery, Principal Planning Officer, will present this report, please. Over to you, Amelia.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for Sorry, Chair, just bear with me. This application is for the continuation of mineral operations, overburden disposal and ancillary activities at Cliff Hill Quarry, including an easterly extension to Old Cliff Hill Quarry with new screening landform, requiring the relocation of parts of Cliff Lane, Cliff Hill Road and Stony Lane, the demolition of PK's Farm and Sunny Cliff, the construction of a new access into Old Cliff Hill Quarry with landscaping, habitat creation and restoration of the quarry void to water. The location is at land at and adjoining Cliff Hill Quarry, West Lane, Colville, and the applicant is Midland Quarry Products Limited. So this slide illustrates the application area for the proposed development as outlined by the red line. The application area is approximately 218 hectares and spans the existing Cliff Hill Quarry and proposed extension. Cliff Hill Quarry comprises 2 separate quarries, Old Cliff Hill Quarry to the east and New Cliff Quarry to the west. These 2 voids, associated processing plant and ancillary infrastructure and rail link comprise a single planning unit and are currently regulated by a number of planning permissions. The voids are connected by a 700-metre underground tunnel, and the site is located approximately 5 kilometres to the southeast of Colville, south of the A511 and west of junction 22 of the M1 motorway. Given the location and span of the site straddles both the administrative areas of Northwest Leicestershire District and the borough of Hinckley and Bosworth. The site also lies within both the National and Charnwood forests. At the local level, access to the site is gained to the west of New Cliff Hill, off the B585 West Lane. This links directly into the plant site for the quarry complex. Immediately west of the site, off the B585, lies a number of industrial and logistics uses which form part of the Barden Hill Industrial Estate and wider landscape. This is interspersed with pockets of agricultural use. Further west lies the village of Ellistown. Lying between New Cliff Hill and Old Cliff Hill lies the village of Stanton-under-Barden and some parcels of land in agricultural use and existing established screening bunds and associated woodland. The closest village to the proposed extension of the quarry is Markfield. Markfield is separated from the application area by the M1 motorway, agricultural land and Hill Hole Nature Reserve. The nearest properties to New Cliff Hill are located approximately 280 metres to the north of the quarry along South Lane. This slide illustrates in closer detail and aerial imagery the application site which encompasses the existing void in which extraction is currently taking place. The proposed eastern extension area is also visible. Old Cliff Hill is bound to the east, west and south by Cliff Lane and Cliff Hill Road. Beyond this, the site is surrounded by agricultural fields, several residential properties and pockets of woodland. The nearest residential properties to Old Cliff Hill are located approximately 30 metres to the east beyond Cliff Lane, including Lilac Cottage. Within and adjoining the site boundary are Stony Lane Farm to the southeast, and within the site lie Peak Case Farm and Sunny Cliff Cottage and their associated buildings. This planning application seeks to update the extant working scheme for the entire quarry, as well as seeking permission for an easterly extension of Old Cliff Hill into agricultural land lying between the quarry workings and the M1 motorway. The proposed extension would release around 30 million tonnes of reserves, which would be sufficient to sustain the quarry for an additional 10 years of production. As such, it is sought to extend the life of the quarrying and associated operations beyond the current expiry date of the 31st December 2032 to the 31st December 2042, with final land restoration to be completed by the 31st December 2044. This slide shows an oblique aerial photograph of Old Cliff Quarry and the area of the proposed eastern extension, and once again the application area is marked out by a red line. The eastern extension would be approximately 22 hectares. This area is predominantly in agricultural use, but also contains 2 residential properties, Peak Hayes Farm and Sunny Cliff Cottage, which would be removed as part of the development. Sections of Cliff Lane, Cliff Hill Road, Stony Lane, and the eastern periphery of Old Cliff Hill would also be removed. The proposed new route of Cliff Lane and alterations to Cliff Hill Road, Stony Lane, and the roundabout at their intersection is marked by a brown and black line. This is covered in more depth in later slides. The application is supported by an environmental statement, technical appendices, in accordance with the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment regulations, and the application has been assessed in full within the assessment of proposed development within the report. The proposals would increase the extraction area of Old Cliff Quarry by around 9 hectares, with a further 5.5 hectares used for the creation of a peripheral landscape screening mound. This is illustrated by the yellow hatched area with green dots, with the edge of extraction denoted by a pink dashed line. It is proposed that all existing vegetation and screening would be retained, except where it would be directly affected by the extension. The new screening landform would meet and tie in with the existing landform as illustrated. The proposal can be summarised in 3 stages, which is 1, the continuation of existing site operations, mineral extraction and processing, and site preparation and construction of the eastern extension. This would include the diversion of Cliff Lane and the construction of replacement site access, demolition of buildings, clearance of vegetation, stripping of soils, and overburden construction of the screening landform. The second stage would be operational to include the mineral extraction, mineral processing, and export of mineral within the eastern extension. And the third stage would be the restoration and aftercare of the entire site. For this presentation, the proposed development will be summarised in these 3 stages. And this slide illustrates that if permission were to be granted, the existing operations, processing and exportation would continue as existing. This is a wider aerial image of New Cliff Hill Quarry, where overburden tipping currently takes place within the void. And there is the tunnel link from Old Cliff Hill, which carries unprocessed material to the plant site in the west of the site. Processed material predominantly leaves the site via HGV from the site's access to serve local construction and infrastructure projects. 30% of material is exported via the site's railhead link to the National Railway network. This is a zoomed aerial photograph of the plant site at New Cliff Hill, which would continue as existing should permission be granted. You can see the existing established screening bund, which would be retained. Initial site preparation and construction works for the eastern extension would include the diversion to Cliff Lane and works to Stony Lane. Here, the proposed realigned route of Cliff Lane, Stony Lane and new roundabout is shown against an up-to-date aerial image of the existing route of the roads. The vegetation to be lost is highlighted in red. A section of the old road would be stopped up to allow the eastern extension to progress. The diversion would include a new pavement, the permanent loss of a section and diversion of a public right-of-way, footpath R15, which currently crosses the land, a new grass verge, a hedgerow with trees, new screening landform, and the ecological enhancement of land to the east of the diverted road. The noise environment for some noise-sensitive residential properties would be affected by the construction works and extension. However, it's been demonstrated that current noise limits and guidance can be achieved subject to the proposed controls. As part of the works, a new 4-arm roundabout would be created to the west of Stony Lane Farm, and a new quarry service entrance would be created along Cliff Hill Road. The existing access would be removed. The new access would be utilised as existing for the purposes of mobile plant delivery, staff access and exportation of small amounts of armorstone. The proposed works are shown here against the aerial image of the existing alignment of the roads, the roundabout and the existing entrance. Again, the vegetation to be lost is shown in red. It should be noted that any planning permission will not give the applicant approval to work on the public highway, and separate approvals must first be obtained from the local highway authority, and again, before any new sections of road can be formally adopted. This drawing illustrates the proposed planting and habitat creation which would take place as part of the proposed highway works along Cliff Hill Road and Stony Lane to mitigate and compensate for the loss of the vegetation as previously illustrated. There would be new woodland planting and new hedgerow along the southern side of the diverted road corridor. In terms of access provision, there would be a new footway in the southwestern corner of the roundabout to connect with the existing footway south of Cliff Hill Road. A maintenance spur of Cliff Hill Road would provide access, if required, to a newly created drainage balancing pond. This drawing illustrates the proposed planting and habitat creation which would take place as part of the highway works and to compensate for the loss of the vegetation. To the northeast of the realigned road, there would be enhancement of existing grassland to produce species-rich grassland, and the new road verge would incorporate the translocation of 10 existing trees and 30 new proposed trees. New hedgerow would be planted along the eastern side of the diverted road corridor. The new screening landform, which would bound the western edge of the eastern extension, would be planted to join up and assimilate with the existing screening bund which surrounds Old Cliff Hill Quarry. Further woodland planting would take place along the eastern edge of the diverted road corridor. In terms of access, right-of-way R15-3 would be connected to the new pavement. The improvements as part of the new road would provide a walking route around the entirety of Old Cliff Hill Quarry. A permissive footpath and viewing area would also be provided within the operational phase of the development. This drawing illustrates the next steps within the site preparation and construction stage. Peak Hayes Farm and Sunny Cliff cottages and buildings would be demolished following ecological surveys. Vegetation clearance and soil stripping would take place under ecological and archaeological supervision. A new screening landform would be constructed from overburden, and a mudstone borrow pit which would be located within the southeastern corner of the extension. The screening landform would be planted once created. And this drawing illustrates an area of ecological enhancement to the west of the void. This would enhance existing grassland into species-rich grassland. This drawing illustrates the next steps, the operational stage of development, including the extraction of mineral within the eastern extension. The extension would be worked progressively by the top-down advancements of quarry faces from the existing quarry. As per existing practice on the site, blasting would liberate the rock. As existing, controls would be placed on blast prediction to ensure vibration is minimised and to limit the nature and scale of any vibration impacts upon local amenity. Whilst the eastern extension would bring the location of blasting closer to residential properties within Markfield and result in the continuation of blasting in the locality, the existing limits and controls on blasting in relation to the nearest sensitive receptors would have to be adhered to. In order to continue to meet these controls, the company may have to alter the blasting design or reduce the scale of blast where necessary. Material would be carried in dumper trucks and taken to the primary crusher, which is located within Old Cliff Hill, and then this material would be transferred via the tunnel to the processing plant. A borrow pit would be created during the initial works in order to store overburden, and movement of the overburden is illustrated here by orange arrows. The mineral would be worked dry, so the void would be continuously dewatered during the operational phase. This would be a continuation of current operations. It is not proposed to increase the current rate of extraction, and so the volume of HGVs exporting mineral from the site would not increase. There would, however, be a continuation of existing HGV movements to and from the site within the locality for an additional period of 10 years. These and all other potential impacts upon the highway and upon local amenity and air quality have been assessed in full as part of the application and considered within the assessment of the proposal in the report. This drawing illustrates the next steps. Overburden would be moved, as illustrated by orange arrows. The borrow pit would be temporarily backfilled and raised in height and shaped to extend the perimeter screening bund and grass seeded. The advancement of quarry faces eastwards is illustrated by the red arrows. Over the course of the construction phase, overburden not used within the construction of the screening landform would be transferred within the site and deposited within the new Cliff Hill void. Again, this drawing illustrates the next steps. As the quarry faces advance eastwards into the final phases of extraction, the overburden would now be placed into the void at New Cliff Hill. An additional woodland planting would take place on the screening landform flanks once the temporary overburden in the corner has been removed. Cross-sections have been submitted and assessed as part of the landscape and visual impact assessment submitted with the application. This is one of the cross-sections B, which illustrates the height of the screening landform once planted relative to the level of the diverted cliff lane and M1. This drawing illustrates the final work phases and exhaustion of mineral reserve at the site. The existing improved restoration scheme for the site comprises 2 open areas of water and a mixture of woodland, scrub and grassland with exposed rock faces. The proposed landscaping works and outline restoration scheme proposed here is similar. It comprises initial landscaping and planting works and ecological enhancement and habitat creation, interim restoration of upper quarry benches, slopes, perimeter woodland and grassland habitats, and the final restoration, which comprises an enlarged water body within the void at Old Cliff Hill and a reduced volume water body within the void at New Cliff Hill with rock faces and scrub. This drawing illustrates the proposed restoration scheme of the Old Cliff Hill void. This drawing illustrates the proposed restoration scheme of the New Cliff Hill void. The site would retain its accesses for maintenance and management of the site. The plant site would be cleared of mineral processing plant and buildings. The outline restoration scheme proposed does not indicate the plant site would be cleared of hard standing. However, conditions have been recommended that require final details of the restoration scheme and the plant site to be submitted within 12 months of the cessation of mineral extraction. In the event of premature cessation of extraction at the site, a condition is recommended that a revised scheme of reclamation and aftercare be submitted to the authority within 6 months of the cessation of extraction and implemented in full within 12 months. An aftercare period of 5 years for all habitats is proposed by the applicant. Following advice from the National Forest Company, an additional 5 years, so 10 years in total, of aftercare for woodland planting is proposed to be secured by way of condition. This application was submitted in August 2022, and since submission, the application has undergone 3 consultation periods following submission of further supporting information following consultation responses, and these largely related to the proposed highway works, tree planting and biodiversity. All representations received have been considered and addressed within the assessment of the proposal. The breakdown of representations received is as follows. Within the first consultation period, 6 representations were received, 3 of which were objections, 2 raised concerns, and 1 made comments but did not object nor support. During the second consultation period, 6 representations were received, 4 of which were objections and 2 raised concerns. In the third consultation period, 1 objection was received. In summary, the representations raised objection and concerns regarding numerous environmental matters, including, but not limited to, the loss of local amenity, vibration, traffic, air quality, dust, impacts upon quality of life of local residents, impacts upon local businesses, effects of the proposals upon the health of the local population, and that the existing rail link is not utilised enough, amongst other matters. All of the environmental and potential impacts upon the environment and amenity of neighbours has been carefully considered, including the potential for cumulative impacts. Whilst the application is considered on its own merits, it's been demonstrated that the existing site and current operations can be suitably controlled by conditions. In this instance, it's also considered that the proposal and its impacts could be suitably controlled through the imposition of suitably worded conditions. These conditions would ensure protection of the natural and built environment, as well as residential and local amenity. Assessment has been made of the cumulative impacts of the development and potential cumulative impacts when combined with other developments within the locality, and on balance, subject to the controls and limitations set out within the conditions, it is considered that the benefits of the scheme outweigh the negative temporary impacts. Given the assessments set out within the report and the controls to be imposed, it is not considered that there will be any unacceptable cumulative impacts associated with the development. Regard is given to the principle and location of the development, Great weight is given to the benefits of mineral extraction and to the economy, and overall the proposal was found to accord with Policy M4 of the Leicestershire Minerals Waste Local Plan, Policy DM4 of Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Local Plan Site Allocations Development Management Policies, and Policy M1 of the Markfield Parish Neighbourhood Plan. In terms of sustainability, the development accords with Policy DM1 of the Leicestershire Minerals Waste Local Plan and Policy DM1 of the Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council Local Plan, Site Allocations and Development Management Policies, and paragraph 11 of the NPPF. The recommendation is to permit, subject to the conditions as set on Appendix A of the report, and the prior completion of a legal agreement to secure provisions for a liaison committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amelia. Right, could we move on to public speaking? Could I invite Mrs. Phyllis Gilbert, who is an objector and a local resident? So, Mrs. Gilbert, Ewan will assist you to your seat. So just wait for 1 second, please. Mrs. Gilbert, until Ewan's returned. Thank you. So Mrs. Gilbert, whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes to speak, and Ewan will give you a 30-second notice towards the end. Thank you.
I'm Mrs. Gilbert. I live at Sunnycliff. I'm very aware.
Now, 1 second, Mrs. Gilbert, let Ewan come and help you, and then we'll restart your 5 minutes. That's what I was going to
Say it's heavier than what I thought that was. Thank you very much.
Just 1 second, Mrs. Gilbert, and then Ewan will restart your 5 minutes. Okay. Over to you, Mrs. Gilbert.
I'm Mrs. Gilbert. I live at Sunnycliff. Lived there since 1965. And I'm well aware of the situation. However, since this application has come through, I think the quarry will have informed you that Mr. Gilbert passed away 4 weeks ago and was buried last Friday. So I've got a situation now where I've got to try and sort everything out myself regarding selling the house back to the quarry, which we're well aware of. There's no objection there. But I've found out that some things take longer than what the others when it comes to legal beagles. And that's so I've got probate in 8 months, and I've got to get my deeds as well, get sorted out to take Mr. Gilbert's name off and my name on. So there's some things that's cropped up that I wasn't aware of a few weeks ago, and he wasn't either, of course. And that, so I would like to be kept up to date for the programme of the quarry extension, which I say I've got nothing against, but would they please respect at the moment that I have got a situation that I didn't anticipate. So I'm trying to do my best, and I think I'm getting there, but I'm not sure, because I've now got to bring in people that I do not know. I'm over 90, so I've got a problem there. My health's not so very good. My eyesight is not so very good. Also, that is the situation basically. I need respect, and also no more intimidated letters, please, because they're very distressing. And also, there's one thing I did hear Amelia say, nobody's mentioned about the bats. And the bats that live in the outhouses down at Stony Lane and at PK's farm. And that, so I'm wondering what's going to happen to those, because we have the weasels and that in the stone walls where they can move, but nobody's mentioned about that bats. So I wonder what's going to happen about those. Otherwise, that's all I need, a bit of respect at the moment, if you don't mind, please. But I am progressing, I will assure you. Thank you very much.
If you just stay seated for 1 minute and just leave your microphone on for now. Members got any questions, Mrs. Gilbert? Mr. Charlesworth.
Thank you, Chair. Who sent you intimidating letters?
It was Mr. Page.
Who's Mr. Page?
He was the man that used to be at Shekshed. It was to do with the quarrying. I had to get them, I had to get somebody in to sort them out. And I had some letters, which I've still got. And he said that I'd misread or misunderstand what the letters meant, but they weren't. It was going to bring in a clause of, I think it was 28 or something, to get us out. And you hadn't even got planning permission, and this is some years ago. So I don't want them now, definitely, when I'm trying to cope with the situation. Because when Pete went into hospital, he only went in for tests for 5 days, but he didn't come out. So there's been an investigation with that as well. So I've got two things as well to cope with now. The quarry, which I'm not against, I'm not bothered about that because my husband worked there 35 years. It's the fact that these situations all come together, that the intimidation letters, which I say I've got, they said, oh, you've read them wrong, but we did not, because I took them to Legal Beagles and they said they're all wrong. So we got that sorted.
Thank you.
But that's the other thing. Otherwise, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bannister.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Gilbert. Thank you for coming in to talk to us today. Can I just pass on condolences for the passing of Mr. Gilbert? And I hope very much that every sensitivities and sympathies will be extended to you.
Thank you.
In this difficult time. I was just interested to know that as and when the time does come for you to sell, do you have plans at the moment as to where you will be going?
I should be definitely going into Markfield Village, because I've got to have a meeting as it is now myself. At the moment, I'm partly sighted, but only because I've got cataracts, nothing else. I'm not blind or anything, it's just cataracts. So I would like a property of some sort, smaller, obviously, because I've got to downsize, but it will have to be in the village so that I can try and cope with myself. I'm the last one of the family, there's nobody else left.
Yeah, but hopefully you'll be able to achieve that when the time comes.
Well, I'm trying to do it now step by step, and some of the steps have already taken. So I do know I've looked at many properties, but there's some were not suitable when Mr. Gilbert was alive, but now they're okay. So I've got to start again from scratch.
Okay.
But I'm getting there.
That's very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Merry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. With your permission, I'd like to speak and ask this lady. Do you want me to? I sit on the Bardon Quarry Liaison Committee
Yes.
in my capacity as County Councillor for Colville South. Do you want me to help you with them with any further correspondence? Have you got family members or people who can assist you
I've
with
got
that?
nobody left. I'm the last one left.
Okay,
And
I will speak to you straight after this meeting and I'll
Thank
take
you.
some details.
Thank you.
And I sit on the committee and I know the CEO and I know the planning officers, etc. And let's get together and hopefully we can resolve any issues.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's very kind of you, Mr. Merry. Thank you. Any other questions from our members? So can I just clarify then, Mr. Gilbert, is it time and courtesy, respect that you are?
Well,
seeking?
I've got a lot of things already stepped up. I've got to see people at the Royal Infirmary face to face because there was some lack of care for Mr. Gilbert. So I've got to meet a committee there because I've not accepted their situation, and also there's some care to do with the local doctor. They're looking into it because what happened. He went in for one thing, but they said he died from another. That is the query, but it's not sinister. So that was it. It was all unexpected. He walked into the hospital, but he didn't. That was it. So there is some query there. So that's put me off my stride a little bit. So I've got to now start again. I do know through probate, which is about 8 months I've been found out. Also, they're going to try and get Mr. Gilbert's name off the deeds and mine left on so I can proceed there. Definitely will move because it was their intention to move anyway. That's not the problem. It's just now I've got other roads I've got to take up. So that is what I need. But I definitely will move, of course. But it's too big for me anyway.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Thank you, Mrs. Gilbert. So I'm sure with Mr. Merry will assist you as best he can.
Thank you very much.
And of course, I would hope the applicants and the owners are listening to your course. So thank you, Mrs. Gilbert.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we do have two members of the Webster family, and Mr. Paul Webster, I believe you're now speaking for the whole 5 minutes. Yeah, so would you like to take the seat at the front? Oh, the button's already pressed for you, but when you're ready,
Good afternoon.
yeah, it'll be 5 minutes and you'll give you a 30-second warning. So the
Okay,
floor is
thank
yours.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, obviously, I live just down the road from Mrs. Gilbert's at the Lilac Cottage. There's obviously when they're blasting the quarry every day, I get constant vibrating, even though it's apparently within the legal limits. Even some days knocks pictures off the walls. It actually feels like an earthquake some days. We have constant dust problems again. Apparently, we had a dust investigation by a firm that works for Bardon Midland Quarry Products. I did request a full independent company, but this was declined by either through Amon Mystery or Midland Quarries. Some days we have the window cleaner. The following day, there's thick dust on the windows. Have the cars cleaned. The next day, they're covered in thick dust, especially in the summer months when there's no rain to subdue the dust on the site. There's numerous things. I'm very worried about the devaluation of the property, especially for my son. I've spoken to 2 estate agents, and they've said it will definitely get devalued. We're having a quarry extension in your front garden, literally. I don't know to see who to seek for compensation, which government department, or is it through a guy at the quarry? I don't know, but as I said, the house will definitely get devalued. I own the paintball centre at the rear of my property. What will happen with road closures, etc.? Obviously, it's my son's primary income and mine. With road closures, with all the lorries, etc. So it's quite a worrying time, really. That's about it, guys. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you just wait there for a moment. Members, any questions? No, thank you. You can probably speak, but microphone button. And then your final speaker this afternoon, members, is the applicant, and that's Mr. Chris Nicol, Heidelberg Materials UK. There's just one speaker this afternoon, so it's over to you, please. Same applies to you, Mr. Nicol. 5 minutes when you're ready. Microphone's already on. Ewan will time you and give you a 30-second warning. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Nicol, and I'm the Land and Planning Manager for Midland Quarry Products. I have been the person responsible for taking the planning application through the submission process. My involvement started as soon as I joined the company in 2019, and finally submitting the application in 2020. Although I know the principles of an eastern extension at the site have been discussed locally for far longer than that. I'm joined today by my colleague Paul Campion, the quarry manager, who's run the quarry part of Cliff Hill for the last 12 years and can answer any questions on the quarry's day-to-day operation that you may have that I can't. MQP would like to endorse the planning committee report, which at 80 pages, I think is one of the longest and most detailed I've read in my 30 years of working on minerals planning applications. Likewise, the proposed 74 conditions are probably the most detailed and comprehensive set of planning conditions I've ever seen for a quarry operation. The report and proposed conditions reflect the scale of Cliff Hill Quarry as a whole and the sensitivities of the eastern extension. They also reflect the amount of work that has gone into the planning application by MQP, the many specialists advising us, the planning authority, the very active liaison committee, plus the very many consultees and members of the public who have fed us their views over these last 5 years. Changes have been made to the scheme as a result, and it is better for it. For example, for the first time, there will be footways and footpaths alongside the local roads around the entire site, which isn't the case now. As you all know, Cliff Hill has existed for over 100 years. It plays a vital role in the delivery of high-strength aggregates, producing over 2 million tonnes each year, with a large proportion exported by rail, and employs over 100 staff, with many more jobs in the supply chain that are reliant on it. The quarry is reserve left for only 6 to 7 years, and for a hard rock quarry, that is very short because of the amount of financial investment required to keep the quarry operational and the lead time needed to develop new areas. Because of the nature of the underlying geology, the eastern extension will be the last extension possible. Obviously, moving and rebuilding about 1 kilometre of road at the cost of over £3 million is a major undertaking that has to be carefully designed and planned. The existing road network will remain in place until the new one is built, and if approved, no work will be undertaken for at least the next 2 years. I can assure you there'll be no work done for at least 2 years before we make any start. It is also important to note that the new roads are not being built for quarry traffic, which will still all go out through the New Cliff Hill existing access on West Lane. The existing extension is about 22 hectares in size, less than half of which will be quarried, the greater part being for landscaping and visual screening. The extraction limit would move about 250 metres in the southeast direction, but not towards the north or the northeast. The existing quarry is well screened from its surroundings, largely by a series of landscape mounds that have been constructed as part of the planning permissions granted in the 80s and 90s. The application will continue this approach with a new and more natural-looking screening mound facing the motorway to the east and to the south. And this will all be fully built before any rock is worked. NQP fully appreciate that work in the quarry can have a day-to-day impact on local residents, particularly by blasting. The vibration limits imposed in the planning permission are the strictest in the industry. However, vibration prediction is now done by computer modelling. It is predictable and reliable. All the results are provided to the planning authority, who may take independent checks, and it does show that over 99% compliance. And we are confident this will continue. The same goes for noise and dust monitoring, which is done regularly. The company does receive occasional complaints, but they are all carefully investigated and never ignored. Earlier this year, on behalf of the liaison committee, the company had a traffic filmed on the A511 independently to check for bad driving by MQP lorries. And other investigations included light pollution, dust, safety alarms and the like, all of which have been brought changes to the site to improve operations. The construction of the new roads and landscaping will inevitably have some local impact over the 18 to 24-month construction period, as all such building work does, but we're confident this can be kept to a minimum because of the tight controls in the planning conditions and by MQP's oversight as a responsible operator. The liaison committee will continue to operate. Participation now includes representatives from Markfield, and we will provide updates to them along the way. The company does have a right to work the minerals in the extension area, subject to paying compensation to surface landowners by way of a series of legal agreements, some going back many years. But MQP has never forced this issue and has no intention of doing so now. We will, of course, give patience and assistance and sympathy to Mrs. Gilbert along the way. The company, so finally, to sum up, we consider the application is vital for the future of the quarry. It is a comprehensive and detailed scheme, the impacts of which we think can be kept to an acceptable minimum and will deliver long-term real benefits. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions you've got.
Thank you for your speak there. Members, Mr. Merry.
It's not so much a question, Chair, and I don't wish to put you on the spot, but you've obviously heard the comments from the lady about the concern she's got with the recent bereavement and all the rest of it, and you're a member of that company. Could I possibly have 2-3 minutes of your time after the meeting so we can address any communication issues? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol. Thank you, Mr. Merry. Members, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Nicol. You go to the public seating. Okay, members, the officer's recommendation is to approve, so I open up the floor to members. Mr. Merry.
I do hope you'll bear with me, Chair, because I've got quite a few points, because this obviously borders onto the village of Ellistown and Battleflat, which is part of my division. My first concern is paragraph 121, where it mentions potential Cliff Lane, the lane closures for the quarry, and a diversion would be put in place. And I can't find in any of the documents where that diversion would go, and I would like it put in as a condition that it doesn't come through Ellistown and Battleflat, and it follows the A511 447 B585 as per all of the diversions for when there's any major roadworks in that area.
Yeah, Amelia.
Thank you, Chair. I have confirmed with the applicant and with Highways that a diversion is not proposed. What is proposed is that the Cliff Hill existing road will be kept open until the new road is constructed. There may be temporary disruption along Cliff Lane when the either end the carriageways need to be joined up. The time that there may be a diversion or temporary traffic lights would be around the works when they take place on the roundabout west of Stony Lane Farm. But there isn't proposed to be a diversion that would sort of divert traffic around to the west of the site.
Mr. Merry?
My next point is it's mentioned in paragraph 183 that a community fund be put in place. Councillor, obviously Bedford mentions it, and I sit on the Barden Quarry Community Fund, and I just wonder if the council have considered that as a condition, because I couldn't find it. If there's a community fund to be put in place, it works very well at Barden Quarry for aggregates, and it's been of great benefit to many associations in the local area. Thank you.
Amelia?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a community fund is not proposed as part of this application, and because it doesn't form a chargeable development, we are unable to impose a requirement for community fund as well, as it wouldn't be necessary.
I think that's for a discussion a bit later on, Mr. Merry.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Paragraph 210, I don't know if it's me, but I couldn't understand it. There's a bit of a typo, or maybe I'm just not reading it properly. And it's on, obviously, I didn't write what page is on, but paragraph 210. See if I can find it. Nearly there. Two seconds.
Page 67, Mr. Merry.
I'm on 69, 68. The last sentence says, overall, it is considered that the proposed design changes and additional supporting information do not affect the conclusions. Is that correct, or is do not affect?
Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Merry. Just to clarify, that is a typo and it should say do not affect.
Thank you.
It's fine, Mr. Merry.
It's to do with dust monitoring. A lot's been mentioned and the quarry probably do lots of it, but I couldn't find any dust monitoring reports in the public domain. Aggregate Industries publish theirs in the public domain so people can see the contents of the dust reports. And one of the biggest fears for anybody living near a quarry is the fear of the unknown. And if they don't know what the dust is, then they get a bit concerned. So can we ask the quarry if they can publish the results, or if they do it in the public domain, point me in the direction of it so I can feed that to the relevant people who've approached me. Thank you.
Amelia?
Thank you, Chair. No, the company do not, to my knowledge, publish the dust monitoring results. I do receive a copy of the reports at the moment under the extant planning permission, the dust monitoring that takes place under that. And those reports also get sent to the Environmental Health Officer at Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council, obviously because that's his speciality, is to look at a particular matter and the results there. There is currently the dust sub-liaison committee which takes place, in which residents are welcome to come to raise concerns if they feel they're able to.
Moving on to Appendix A, the conditions now, Chair. Basically, it does say in there, paragraph 41, page 119, that the presentation of the monitoring results related to dust. So is that the dust reports you're on about, which gets sent to the Dust Liaison Committee?
Sorry, are you able just to remind me where you're referring to?
Have you got the paragraph, Mr. Merry?
Yes, this condition would require a dust monitoring scheme and all those details listed between A and G. So that would include the methodology and also the presentation results and submission to us.
Last one, Chair. Sticking with the conditions, number 46, page 120. It talks about adverse conditions, strong winds and dry weather to stop the quarry operations, but doesn't tell you how strong the wind's got to be and how dry the weather's got to be. I couldn't find that in any documentation whatsoever.
Okay, and then Amelia, and then if you want it, we'll move on then, Mr. Merry. Thank you.
No, you're right. The condition doesn't refer to sort of wind levels. I don't know whether that would be necessarily enforceable, because I don't know how we could go out and measure the wind, and because it would be live, whether it would be better to keep it as worded, because it gives us discretion as to when it's necessary to investigate and take action.
Can I come back, Chair, very quickly? I don't think that's acceptable, Chair. You need to have conditions in. I know it's very difficult to determine what you want to have as your criteria, but I'm sure if you work with a quarry, otherwise they could just operate all the time, even when you've got adverse conditions. You might think it's okay, but they think it's bad, and vice versa. We need to have some baseline measurements we have at the other quarries.
Oliver, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I think the difficulty we would have is defining the kind of exact and precise scenarios in which an adverse weather condition scenario would be triggered. So we know that wind speed isn't a constant thing, and it's constantly changing direction, and it's constantly changing speed, and it's gusting and so on. So there might be points where it gusts beyond a certain threshold for maybe a few seconds and then goes below that. And I think it's that constant variation and then constant changing of directions which would make it very difficult for us to actually enforce something if we did put defined wind speeds within a condition like that. I think it's also perhaps less about specific wind speeds and more about the impact. And what we've got at the moment is a condition where we look at whether there are adverse impacts occurring because of adverse weather conditions. So we've got the flexibility there. Now, the wind speed might not actually be particularly high, but it's a very dry day and it's blowing specifically in the direction of one of the sensitive receptors, and it's causing impacts. Now, that we would still be able to take action under that condition at the moment based on the impacts that are occurring rather than the wind speed itself. So I would suggest at the moment we've got a flexible condition that allows us to react based on impacts rather than a cause which may or may not be having an impact.
Sorry, Chair, but I just think you either need to take the condition out or put some caveats in there. I just think you've put yourself in a corner there, because you're saying it's a very. We've got the dust monitoring. If there's adverse weather with wind and it's blowing the dust, then that will come under the dust monitoring. I just think it's either an unnecessary condition or badly worded. That's the last word I've got, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merry. Mr. Charlesworth.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, it's nice that the speaker for the applicant has given us the assurance that the residents at the two farms will be given all the necessary time to get their affairs in order and move out at their pace without any cajoling. My only question is blasting. It's been mentioned, is it acceptable with modern blasting that nearby properties are actually being shook? And I know they've got a monitoring regime in place, which was mentioned. Do we physically go there and check on things and look at records, or do we have to wait for them to submit readings and measures or whatever?
Thank you, Mr. Charlesworth. I know there's quite a set of detailed comments about 6 millimetres and all sorts of stuff. So, Amelia.
Yes, with regards to vibration effects of bright vibration, it is proposed to have a blast monitoring scheme be submitted in which it would set out the location of the company to provide fixed monitors in properties or outside of properties, outside the facade, in the perimeter, and that this would be flexible so they can react to as and when they're getting certain readings. In terms of our complaint investigation, which I also think perhaps you're asking, is that we as an authority, we have seismographs ourselves, so as and when we get complaints, we can take those anonymously and put them in residents' houses, and we do that for a period of time, often around 6 weeks, or it could be over a longer period of time if the resident feels it's necessary, in order to measure the vibration effects of an individual property on a case-by-case basis.
And you've got the power to stop blasting if it's contravening those regulations?
So the there are limits that are proposed to be set, which are the same as the limits at the moment, is that the quarry must design within a 95% confidence level blasting to be below 6 millimeters per second peak particle velocity at any vibration sensitive property. However, the upper limit for that would be 12.
And the consequences if they exceed that?
Yes, then we would be looking at taking enforcement action.
Thank you, Amelia. Right, members, any further questions? And Amelia, thank you. That was a significant report that you've put together for members. So we have the officer's recommendation to permit. Can I move to the vote? Is there a... I beg your pardon. I was just going to say, is there a proposer? Did say, is there a proposer? Thank you. Is there a proposer? Mr. Bannister?
Second that.
Thank you. Ms. Walker. Right, do we have a proposer and a seconder for the officer's recommendation to permit? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. So, agenda item 9 is 2024/10117/04 Fortina Building Products Limited to continue the development of Desford Brickworks and Quarry by amending the provisions of Condition 2 of Planning Permission 2018/0669/04 insofar as it relates to the phasing of the mineral extraction land at Desford Brickworks, Heathrow, Desford, pages 135 to 172. And members, you have on the desk in front of you some addendums. So, officer to present, Charlie Cookson. Charlie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to the variation of Condition 2 of Planning Permission 2018-0669-04, which was granted in 2019. And this is in order to amend the chronological order in which the quarry phases are worked at the land at Desford Brickworks. Desford Brickworks is located 3.7 kilometres to the northwest of the village of Desford, 2.7 kilometres southeast of Bagworth, 2.4 kilometres northeast of New Boldvedon, and 1.1 kilometres southwest of Thornton. As can be seen on the site location plan on screen, the site sits immediately to the south/southwest of Bagworth Heath Woods and to the west of the Merrilees Industrial Estate. The site is accessed from a private road leading off Heath Road and from the southeast of the existing quarry via the Merrilees Industrial Estate. The nearest residential properties include Heath House, Woodside Farm, Swallows and Fox Covert Stables and the Lodge, all of which are labelled on screen. Footpaths around the application site include R70, which enclose the northern section of the site in a horseshoe shape, linking Heath Road in the west and footpath R71 to the northeast of the Brickworks buildings. Footpath S14 runs parallel to the southern boundary of the quarry extension. As depicted by the site context plan on screen, the application site covers 82.4 hectares of land and encompasses the brickworks, ancillary development and the existing quarry, including the void and unworked areas to the north of Heath Road. And then the approved quarry extension is to the south of Heath Road, which currently comprises 26 hectares of agricultural land. So to provide some context regarding the proposal, on screen shows the phasing plan approved under the permission granted in 2019. As you can see, the plan was to begin extracting from the extension area to the south of Heath Road in a westerly direction prior to the continuation of extraction in the original quarry area in an anti-clockwise direction. Clay is extracted at the site on a campaign basis 2 to 3 times a year, and each campaign typically lasts between 6 to 8 weeks. This aerial image taken circa 2022 shows the quarry context and is representative of the stripped areas at the time of submission. The applicant is now proposing to work the upper part of phase 7 in advance of opening up the extension areas to the south of Heath Road. As seen on screen, this would constitute the early removal of a pinnacle of clay from within this phase down to a level of around 110 metres above ordnance datum, prior to commencing phase 1 within the extension area. This would facilitate a large area for clay stockpiling adjacent to the factory infrastructure, resulting in 2 larger rather than 3 smaller clay campaigns per year, and that is deemed a fair operational reason in the determination of this application. On the right of the screen shows an aerial view of phase 7 from May 23, and the left shows some ground level photos of the phase taken from our visit to the site. The top photo was taken looking towards the northwestern side of phase 7, and the bottom photo was taken looking towards the southwestern side. The phase 7 area itself currently forms a pinnacle of remnant high ground and covers around 4.2 hectares. This includes a small area of grassland with soils and mineral stockpiles and excavation batters and access ramps sloping down to meet the previously worked out areas surrounding at typically around 150 metres above ordnance datum. It is flanked by quarry workings to the southwest, ancillary buildings associated with the brick factory to the north/northwest, and the stockyard to the north/northeast. To the southeast lies areas of agricultural land containing future reserves of clay. As you can see, this updated phasing plan now shows the original phasing order against an alphabetically updated order of phasing. It is noted that all other aspects of the development would remain as approved under the permission granted in 2019. The proposal does not seek to introduce any new physical development to the site, expand the site area, intensify operations, or amend the restoration scheme for the quarry. There have been no objections from any statutory or technical consultees, and there has been 1 representation from a member of the public. This was regarding the potential effects over time on natural water levels and water supply from a borehole within close proximity to the application site. Given the nature of the proposal solely altering the phasing of the development, impacts on the water environment, including hydrology and hydrogeology, are considered negligible given the depth assumptions of the final worked out landform for this area of the site do not change. This position is outlined within paragraph 4.12 of an addendum to the environmental statement submitted as part of the previous application. Furthermore, the EA were consulted as part of the decision-making process and provided no objection. Potential impacts relating to air quality, archaeology and cultural heritage, ecology, transport and water environment have been considered as part of the environmental statement addendum and are not anticipated to give rise to impacts over and above those previously assessed. The overall principle of development is established by the existing planning permission. However, since the granting of that permission, the Leicestershire Minerals and Waste Local Plan was adopted in 2019, and Policy M5 provides additional support for the steady and adequate supply of brick clay. It is also worth reiterating that the development is supported in local and national policy, particularly with its steady and sufficient supply of industrial minerals and associated benefits. Other matters relating to the need for development, amenity and environmental impacts, including landscape, visual and noise impacts and impacts on public right-of-ways, have all been assessed against a relevant planning policy and are all considered acceptable. In reviewing the planning permission, the opportunity has been taken to update the conditions where relevant, particularly in relation to information submitted as part of conditional submissions after permission was granted in 2019. When planning permission was previously granted, it was subject to a legal agreement amended by a deed of variation in 2022, which covered the operation of a liaison committee, annual review of the possible use of the Ivanhoe Railway line for the transportation of minerals in connection with use of the site, and HGV routing. The legal agreement will need to be updated to take account of this application. So, in conclusion, the recommendation is for the application to be permitted subject to the conditions set out in Appendix A, as amended by the addendum dated the 21st of the 11th 24, and the prior completion of a legal agreement to ensure existing obligations are attached to the new permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. There are no public or applicant speakers, so the floor is open to the members. Mr. Charlesworth.
Yeah, it's just on the addendum, please. The 3 conditions or criteria mentioned with the deletion in red, that only applies to area 7, does it? Or is this now applying to the whole site?
Charlie?
So the conditions were amended after we spoke with the applicant the other day. It's essentially, rather than them working phase 7A as being the trigger point to provide that information, it is now, we've now implemented a time limit instead. This was because at the time of the previous submission, the trigger point was when they were going into the original phase 1 area, which is to the south of Heath Road. That application was for an extension, so there was an extant planning permission already in the northern area, if that makes sense. So it made sense to be in the trigger point at the bottom. Therefore, as phase 7A is already in the older sort of quarry area, it wouldn't have made sense for them that to be the trigger, and that's why we had those discussions with the applicant. Hopefully that makes sense.
Partly. Not wishing to be rude. So how does it affect the whole site, these addendums, or doesn't it?
Charlie?
It doesn't. It just changes the way in terms of how we obtain that information. So like I say, rather than it coming before phase 7A, it will just come within 12 months, but the information should be.
Any other questions from members? Okay, you have the officer's recommendation. Shall we move to the vote? Mr. Lovegrove propose. Mr. Grimley to second. All those in favour? That is unanimous. So thank you, Charlie. Application 2024 Blue 1011704 Blue Fortunes Building Products Limited is approved. So thank you, Charlie. Right, members, we move on to agenda item 10, delegated decisions. We are only required to note the report, but it's quite clear that there's an awful lot of applications from Severn Trent in there. So I'm actually going to invite Oliver to explain why there are so many applications in one swoop from Severn Trent. Charlie, Oliver.
Thank you, Chairman. There are a number, as you will note, a number of Severn Trent applications which have been dealt with over this quarter. Part of the explanation for this is that Severn Trent have quite considerable permitted development rights, which means they are able to construct stuff on existing sites without needing to go through the express planning permission process. However, in this quarter, there's been a number of instances where individual elements don't benefit from those permitted development rights, and they have had to apply for permission. One of the elements that has triggered that has been a rather large pipeline, and something that they don't benefit for planning permission, automatic planning permission, is new accesses onto existing highways. So there are applications within here related to that piece of pipeline infrastructure, and particularly temporary access arrangements for construction purposes relating to that piece of infrastructure. So that explains very quickly the reason why we have a higher than normal number of Severn Trent applications dealt with under delegated items within this quarter.
Thank you, Oliver. Perfect. Any other questions from members? No, thank you. Agenda item 11 is any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent. There are no urgent items. That then leaves me with the agenda item 12, chairman's announcements. The only well, I've got two. So the first one is the only announcement I have to make is that the next meeting is on Thursday, the 9th of January 2025 at 2 p.m, which also means this is the last meeting of the DCRB ahead of Christmas and New Year. So may I take the opportunity to thank for your time and commitment for this year. Have a wonderful Christmas, and we will see you in 2025. Scary times. Thank you, members, and the meeting closed. Thank you.